tell my world you never was my girl. You can burn my clothes when I am gone. Or you can tell your friends this what a fool I've been, and laugh and joke about me on the phone. Or you can tell my arms go back to the farm. You can tell my feet to hit the floor. Or you can tell my lips to tell my fingertips they won't be reaching out for you no more. But don't tell my heart, my achy breaky heart, I just don't think he'd understand. And if you tell my heart, my achy breaky heart, he might blow up and kill this man. Woo-hoo-hoo. Well, I hope that brought some joy and cheer to all of you. And my guest for this evening is Andy Najjar, who's the Chief Operating Officer at FutureSolve, which is an HR tech marketplace based in the US. Now, Andy and I are going to be talking about what are those HR technology trends that we can see in 2022. So let's join the conversation. So Andy, just coming to the point of discussion today, I thought I'll briefly just talk about some of the learnings of 2021 that might, in a way, drive the evolution of HR tech in 2022 as well. So some of these are that perhaps organizations and leaders have become far more flexible in the last 1 year, last couple of years actually, and we're also seeing a lot of autonomy now being given to employees. Also, everybody is now talking about empathy and employee well-being. These are really cornerstones of every organization. Further, we've seen a real explosion of the gig workforce, and clearly, more than ever, employees are seeking a lot more flexibility, and many of them want to get out of full-time jobs and do stuff that they actually like. We also know that the hybrid workplace is here to stay. There's also plenty of digital transformation, which has led to adoption of technologies, and people are looking at automating processes, new ways of working, and what have you. Lots of focus on learning, skilling, and finally, the HR profession is also getting transformed, and hopefully we will see HR teams move away from just managing operational roles to being more strategic in people and process strategy. So with that, Andy, let me come to the topic, and for our conversation today, which is really the what do we see as HR tech trends in 2022, and let me really bring you in with the first one, which is really around learning and skills and competencies and career pathways, and lots of technology happening there, and it'll be great to see and hear your thoughts in terms of what are those new exciting trends that we can see from an HR tech space perspective in that space in 2022?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to talk about a few areas, and I'll talk about the core foundation of how it starts all. But what we're seeing is really when it comes to skills, the skills are changing rapidly, and there are new emerging technologies, innovations, and companies have to pivot. And because of the market today, and the fight for talent, a lot of companies want to grow their talent to move in that direction versus trying to acquire new talent. So it all starts with understanding what skills they need and having the ability to measure skills. Even governments are now pushing for upskilling. I mean, like here in Texas, we have a grant that upskills talent and helps companies pay for some of that upskilling to prepare them for new jobs, new opportunities, new industries. And then it's a matter of how do you go about addressing those skills? How do you train somebody? How do you help them learn? Is it on the job? Now that we have hybrid workforce, how are we doing that in a tailored manner? How are we understanding the best way to learn? How do we replicating the best way to learn? Like there's a lot of artificial intelligence today that's looking at learning, understanding what a successful learning path looks like in an organization based on successful measurements, and then prescribing that to the rest versus saying here's a list of courses or training and you can figure out your own. It's basing it on data that's actually true, validated. And then the other one is because there's so much change, people work from home, a lot of jobs are changing, new opportunities are happening. People want to understand what that looks like outside the company and inside. So if we can tailor the learning to eventually show like a career path or a learning path that people could pursue to move from one area of the business to another and take initiative of their career, maybe even take initiative of the type of work they do or when they work. That's all becoming a big necessity. And we're going to see it as, instead of being just an option before, it's now going to become core and foundational to the type of business and all businesses today.
Yeah, so Andy, that also brings me to the topic around link to learning in terms of what is really the readiness of organizations. When we look at skills, capabilities, competency matrices, it's so exciting, and there's lots of technology out there. But I'm really wondering, what is the readiness of organizations, and what will it really take for organizations to start adopting all that in a much bigger way, right? You have SMBs, mid market, enterprise, and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the biggest I would say step is for me to decide to go in that direction, because a lot of companies today don't really have a very robust skill infrastructure. They don't understand what skills they need, the gaps, where people are. So it takes some effort there. But if you have the right technology that helps you do that, it'll help save some time and actually create an infrastructure for growth and expansion, right? Because as new departments open up, as new areas open up, you have the infrastructure that you follow.
Yeah.
So that's the first one is, they have to decide to go in that direction, and they have to actually take initiative on setting that up. But the long-term gain is worth it, because everybody has an understanding of where they stand, what to address, how to grow, what needs to happen, what direction we're going, versus just based on what we feel or what we think it is, versus having a concrete understanding of it.
Right, absolutely. And you did touch upon future skills, future roles, which is very interesting because just when I've taken this example before, if you look at an enterprise salesperson, for instance, a capability that that person would have would be, let's say, negotiation, and there are a whole lot of skills around it, like communication and ability to research and so on and so forth. But the skills are changing because actually these roles are also changing, right? So you have with increased digitization happening, the kind of skill sets that the salesperson needs to have is also changing constantly. Likewise, there are new roles emerging, like from an enterprise sales, people are talking about a full stack salesperson. So the skill sets are all changing. So I guess the challenge will also be for the technologies to keep pace with that, and to be able to really predict what are those future skills, what are those future roles. So it might be a good blend of human intervention and technology, which might actually make all that happen.
Yeah, and the other part is, before it all fell onto the company, and I think more than ever now, the company and the employees can have a major role in that.
Right.
The employees could voice things that they're hearing, or of interest, or new emerging technology they're looking to go into.
Yeah.
And as a result, the company could also see how they're going in a direction where they can actually foster that. So
Right.
it's a two-way street for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that was a great point around the whole topic of skills and roles and competencies and learning and so on. So moving on to the next trend from an HR tech standpoint that we see in 22 is really around the evolution of the hybrid workplace. Now we all know that the hybrid workplace is here to stay. More so after the third wave, because after the second COVID wave, a lot of people were opening offices very rapidly, and the general feeling was that many companies will open up. But I think the third wave has also sent the message that, look, many organizations feel that they need to really adapt to a new workplace strategy. So I think, while there's been some study which says that 70% of leaders want their employees to be back in the office. It's only 40% of the employees are saying they would actually like to get back. And now with the increasing, with what I was listening to a interview of Satya Nadella of Microsoft today, and so people refer to it as the Great Resignation. He was referring to it as the Great Reshuffle, where people are sort of figuring out what they actually need to do. So I think with that, it's putting a lot of pressure on technologies to also evolve. Now we know that a lot of technology has happened in the last 2 years to enhance the enhanced collaboration between the workforce. But I think we're going to see that further moving forward. In fact, I was reading another article which said that today a large enterprise has over 200 SaaS applications prevalent there, and perhaps around 15 to 20 HR tech applications. And that's one thing. The other thing is that there's a lot of legacy systems that organizations have. So the big challenge would be around integrating all this, so that when you have a strategy around a hybrid workforce, how do you ensure that everybody is connected, everybody is able to use the tools and actually get the maximum benefit out of that? But having said that, Andy, I think there are, to my mind, 3 points to sort of consider. The first is really that, can the HCM or the HRMS platform really become the focal point for employees? So when you look at all these collaboration engines and everything which is employee facing, can the entire engagement of the employee happen through the HCM, which means everything else really gets integrated into that, and it becomes operates really like a single sign-on. And in a way, we've been talking a lot about work tech in the last couple of years, but in a way, this should further accelerate the adoption of work tech. So perhaps we might see HCM platforms, increasingly becoming open, having tools to integrate. Number one. Secondly, we probably will see a lot of HCM platforms acquiring tools in the work tech space, right? There could be work tech platforms which are acquiring HCM tools. So I think the world will change rapidly, and I think many of the new HCM platforms that are going to be born in 2022 will be truly work tech as well, and they will put a lot of pressure on existing HCM platforms. So I think that's the first trend that I'm seeing.
Yeah. So when it comes to hybrid workforce, I mean, I wanted to agree with you on all the points. First off, is I believe hybrid is here to stay, right? It really opened up our eyes for a new balance of work, and a lot of people are actually productive, and they can have creative time that they can go and meet in the office, but also do their jobs at the desks at home as well, and have a hybrid workforce environment. But there are a few things that you mentioned that are definitely key when this happens. One is, how do you communicate effectively throughout the platforms? And I think we've seen a lot of change, like Zoom being adopted and all of that, but I don't think we have the answer fully yet. There is so much opportunity on how you can evolve and support that change. Like, for a perfect example is, I remember when we first went hybrid, it was a little bit annoying for me to have all of these meetings show up on my calendar that were all Zoom meetings, and each one was just a question that an employee wanted to ask, or one of my team members wanted to ask. Right. And I was like, there should be an easier way to just voice that question, and then they can get back to you during the times that they have. And even then, today, it's still not solved. Like, it's not always a chat, right? And there might be a lot of change in like voice and being able to do voice messaging in a much impactful way. The other big thing in hybrid workforce with HCMs is a lot of HCMs today have performance management as part of their processes. Right. And all jobs, as they're changing, if you're hybrid, companies are looking at measuring that. How do you measure when they're not in the office? And there's much more impactful ways of measurement. So the ways that you're measuring performance, the way you're looking at productivity, the way you're measuring all of that across the company is changing. It's changing rapidly, but it's changing to the good, because if you're at home and you're productive, it doesn't matter where you are, the numbers are going to show through your performance system, right?
Yeah.
And then we're going to see new ways of actually measuring that as well through the HCMs.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, I was listening in that same interview with Satya Nadella. He was talking about how they see in a company like Microsoft all this organically evolve. So, his view was that you let the managers decide the way they would like to work. Would they like to work remote? Would they like to work in person? And keeping their own teams and the requirements and challenges that their own teams have. They were really empowering people down the line to actually take those calls. But the other interesting thing that he touched upon, which I also wanted to mention, was really the emergence of the metaverse. And that's an area where Microsoft and Accenture and all these people are doing a fair amount of work, where you could really have, a hologram or an avatar which is physically present in a meeting. And Accenture, I believe, has something called the nth floor, where people could actually visit, in the metaverse. And even Microsoft has something called Allspace. So I think all this is perhaps new technology, but I think it will really enhance that entire experience, because there's been so much of fatigue with the traditional remote, connectivity that people have. So I think there's a lot of innovation that we're going to be seeing, and perhaps therefore a whole lot of new products and new platforms that are going to come in, and this in turn is going to put a lot of pressure on existing platforms and HCM platforms. In fact, there's a lot of investment coming in. I just had a meeting with a consulting firm out of London, and they said that, look, we are focused only on the metaverse. Tomorrow I have a discussion with a VC fund out of the US, and they said we're only looking for metaverse investments. So this is going to be big, and I think in 2022 we will probably start seeing some of the hybrid workforce, getting immersed into that metaverse experience as well.
Absolutely, I 100% agree. And believe it or not, I've even encountered a few companies today that are going to be live with their metaverse in a few months. So it's not too far off. And as these innovations start coming in, we're going to start seeing how they play a part. I remember a few years back, somebody was telling me about a company that had screens on over a certain desk. So if you're not at your desk, you can actually have your face showing in the office, so people can come and talk to you as they do. But that's the old way of doing it. Now with the metaverse, there's all new ways that we can do this, and it's going to be all exciting.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. So with that, Andy, let's move on to the third point, which is really around this entire talent marketplace, internal and external, and the fact that it's really here to stay. It's perhaps getting very important for every organization to adopt it. And also the fact that entire, talent acquisition, talent mobility, these spaces are all converging and merging. So it'll be great to hear your thoughts, Andy, on this topic, and we could have a discussion around it as well. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And for that point, I wanted to start off with one saying that we have at FutureSolve, one of our founders' philosophy of it. And it starts with, a lot of companies used to call it talent acquisition. And at FutureSolve, we do not believe you acquire people. And it came from a purchasing department, and we believe that the new word is talent access. We're looking at accessing talent. We access it externally and internally in different ways. So when we're looking at recruiting, a long time ago, we used to say, okay, let's just go out and find somebody and put a resume. But the new changes is, can you create a pipeline of talent that is looking to work with your company even before the jobs are available, right? So you can have a way you can reach out to talent and pull when you need it. And that's the future of actually talent access. But that is also slowly merging with also how companies are moving from an agile environment internally. They're no longer saying somebody's in a role. Maybe we have a project or a new innovation project or a department that's opening up. Who do we have today that we can access internally as well? True. And more, those two areas are going to start merging. And we're seeing that very strongly, even with succession planning. The future of succession planning is having a hybrid. You're looking at future leaders within, but you're also looking at future leaders without. And if you do those together in a very productive and innovative way, you're going to find that first, for the roles that you have leaders within, you can access them quickly, but for ones that you don't, you still have a really nice pipeline outside. So how do you manage that is going to be a big trend. The evolution of doing that, the evolution of building these pools and managing them in a way where it's both internal, external, and pulling on people with certain projects, knowing their skill set. We come back to the skill area and seeing who can do what in the company. That's all going to be a new trend. Technologies are going to slowly start moving in there and going to make that impact, but also companies are going to start requesting for that need.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think just to add on to that, I think I also see all of this as an extension to the earlier point that we discussed, which was learning. So learning in the traditional format is all around curated content, and you spoke about AI and a number of tools which are really facilitating all that. But I think it's also now around unstructured learning. So how do you really build that capability through unstructured learning? And therefore, if you are faced with a problem, how do you identify who to reach out to? Now, I remember in my days, corporate days, working in multinationals like Walters Kluwer. When I was stuck with a problem, let's say on pricing or distribution strategy, and I wanted to think out of the box, I really did not know who to reach out to within the organization. It was only my boss and some people that I had perhaps met at a conference, but beyond that, it was really limited. But imagine a platform which really helps me to find who are those experts, get somebody to mentor me on that. So and we know of platforms like Zictel, which are out there, which are actually facilitating all that. Likewise, if I'm working on projects, how do I collaborate with people? How do I apply my learning?
Mm-hmm.
So one is to learn theoretically, but how do I then apply my learning? And I think that's a great way for employees also to brand themselves. Because when you look at this entire talent mobility space, one is about your skills. The other is about what have you actually done, and what are you capable of, and how have you showcased it beyond your 9 to 5 job, for instance, right? So I think I think these platforms are now going to become extremely critical for organizations, and perhaps we will see a very rapid adoption of all that in 2022.
Absolutely. And immersive learning is going to be more and more important. I mean, come back to the metaverse as well. Imagine, learning through the metaverse, interacting. I mean, there's so much opportunity, but you're right on that. And definitely the way to access talent is changing, to access skills, to know who's there, to reach out to them, and to do learning on the job is the new trend.
So with that, Andy, let's move on to the last point for our discussion this evening, which is around employee experience, and that we expect will become mainstream in 2022. And we all know that every company is in the people business, and unless the employees are happy, it's very unlikely that the customers will be happy. And I think it's also about action. So, for instance, if employees know that their managers and the management is actually listening to them and also taking action on the feedback that they get, then they will definitely be far more engaged. So now we've got lots of technologies coming in, and perhaps the early stage technologies were mostly these annual surveys and so on and so forth. Now all that has moved into things like pulse surveys, bot-based engagement, sentiment analysis around texting, around even what happens in meetings and things of that kind. I think there's a lot of that which is starting to happen. And I just wanted to briefly touch upon what Josh Bersin said recently, and he spoke about employee experience really being in 4 stages. First being that you have to listen to people and analyze their problems, and see how these problems can be bucketed into various cohorts or various employee persona. For instance, if you're running a food business like Domino's, then you've got your kitchen staff, you've got your delivery staff, restaurant, marketing, and so on and so forth. And all of them have some unique, distinct problems. So how do you really bucket it? The second really was around, how do you build a multifunctional team to be able to start looking at those issues and perhaps trying to address them. The third is really around, how can employees have access to self-service to be able to address some of these problems, and therefore what are some platforms and technologies out there. And finally, what's the roadmap that organizations need to have, which is that, is there a technology stack that they need to invest in? Is their HCM platform being adaptive? So I think there's a clear definition of how EX can really get adopted by organizations. But I just have noted some points in terms of what does that mean for HR technology. And I think when I really look at it, I think in 2022 we're going to see far more acquisitions in this space. I think it's a very super hot space. We've seen in the past Qualtrics being acquired by SAP, Glint by LinkedIn and Microsoft, and then Peakon by Workday. But I think 2022 we'll see a lot more acquisitions in the space because employee listening is becoming extremely important. Also, a lot of HCM platforms will start building in this space. So many HCM platforms already have pieces in it. So I think they will see a lot of additional product getting built into it. Another thing that I read recently was again around while the EX space is big, there are several solutions which are micro vertical. So for instance, even recently, a company like Perceptics, they acquired Waggle and Culture IQ, which were sort of micro verticals in the space, and they've recently announced acquisition of another company called Cultivate. So I think we're going to see plenty of that, and perhaps most importantly, we're going to see a move into listening feedback, but moving into what we call as action platforms. Because at the end of the day, it's about what action you can take and how can you change behaviors of people. So therefore, one is going to be showing the empathy and taking action on the challenges that employees have. But the other thing really would be in terms of how do you nudge them, how do you send learning to them, how do you coach them, how do you engage with them differently so that there can be a shift in behavior as well. So I think we're going to see a lot of significant change in technology as far as employee experience is concerned to actually address this entire space around action and behavior change as well.
Yeah, I mean, I always say, like, pre-pandemic, companies knew exactly who the customer is from a marketing perspective, what they look like, how many hours they sleep, how many times they open their phone. They know everything about their customer.
Yeah.
But we knew nothing about our employees.
Correct.
And after the pandemic, there's a big shift from instead of top-down listening from the bottom up,
Right,
to address and move quickly on employee experience. And now it's all about understanding the employee. What does it look like? What are they saying? When are they saying it? What are the problems? And then taking action. And today, companies don't have that data, so they need to actually start gathering it and gathering effectively, because we all know the employee lifecycle experience, even onboarding by itself,
right,
is the biggest identifier of if they're going to leave or not. So if you do it right from the beginning all the way to the end, you're going to maximize the return that you're going to get from employees, and they're going to be happy. They're going to work better for your company. They're going to invest in your company. They're going to refer their friends and family to be customers. So it's a big cycle. So it's definitely becoming mainstream, and I'm seeing the same thing from my end. So
excellent, Andy. So I think that was a real exciting conversation with you, Andy, around some of those great trends that we're going to see in the HR tech space in 2022. Thanks so much for your time, Andy, and look forward to some more fabulous conversations with you in the future.
Yeah, absolutely, Thomas. I always enjoy our conversations, and thank you for inviting me, and we look forward to further more.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Take care.